Reignier, sing for the king.
The game is yours to play now.
The light provides.
This is Eventide Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Eventide Radio. This is a fan-made Destiny podcast where we have roundtable discussions about a variety of different topics concerning the popular video game franchise. At its core, this show is about having in-depth discussions about the game from a variety of different perspectives. I'm your host, Scotty, and with me are co-hosts Rob and Robbie today. And before we get started to preview our topics for today, we're going to be talking about the new Gambit labs and the general thoughts about the state of Gambit as a whole right now. We're going to be talking about the new Grandmaster Nightfalls, including Birthplace of the Vile, and of course the Lightblade strike with that insane arc burn. So before we get started, Rob, what's one thing you've been up to this week in Destiny?
Yeah, so started my inevitable hatred with GMs this week, tackling through those, which we'll talk about. I tried to give Gambit Labs a stab, which we'll also talk about. And then I really want to, so this is also kind of a public service, is the Unbroken seal is going to be going away in 3 or 4 seasons. And so this is kind of the last chance that you'll have to get the Unbroken title, which requires you to go Legend 3 different seasons. And so I have never been able to get Legend. I've gotten really, really close tons and tons of times going solo, but I've never been able to get to like 5,500. I've hovered around like 52, 5,300 quite a few times, and then just never been able to get over that like last little hump. So I'm really trying to do that because I feel like I can do it, and I'm not trying to get carried. Like I'm trying to just find like a team that I can do it with. Because it's like something that I've always wanted to achieve and just never been able to. So I've been playing comp this week quite a bit and having a good time. I finally got I'm always going to butcher the name, the renewal grasps for the hunter. So I've been playing with that build, which I know is kind of a dirty scumbag play, but it is a lot of fun. And I've just sort of gotten over the fact that like you can't just play comp, you have to like lean into meta and cheese strats and stuff like that. So I'm just embracing the darkness and going all in with renewal. But I've been having a lot of fun. I haven't gotten any hate messages yet, so maybe it's not that bad. But yeah, so I've been doing a lot of comp and GMs this week.
Fun. That's cool. Very thematically appropriate, especially for renewal grasps to be leaning into the darkness. Robbie, what's one thing you've been up to this week in Destiny?
Well, I got my final Insidious from the raid this Monday. So I guess since Tuesday, I was like, I crafted it, obviously. And I've been trying to level it up because I had this Trials memento that I didn't know what to put on. And I figured, well, I've been using the Darkest before a lot on Trials. So this is also like an arc pulse, and people are saying it's really good. So I put it on it, and then I remember that, it has to be level 30 for me to actually put the shader on it. So I've been trying to use that here and there, just on random stuff. And but I guess yesterday was like the day I played for the longest. I was just doing Trials. It's been tough this weekend, and I don't know if I've been enjoying it. I kind of do, but I kind of don't at the same time. Also, there's like this weird glitch going around for Trials this weekend. We can talk about it. I'm not doing that. I was trying to go like, legit flawless, obviously with help, but not doing the glitch thing. So yeah, I'll keep doing that like even today. So we'll see.
Cool. I wish you the best in that. As for me, I really have not been playing that much Destiny, to be honest. But last night, I just played a normal Nightfall with some friends. I've been busy outside of Destiny, but I played the Scarlet Keep Nightfall. It was fun. Nothing exciting this week for me. But anyway, so our first topic is Gambit. So there was a new lab this weekend, and it involved a flip of invasion. Like when the other team gets to invade. So if you put in, what was it, Rob, you said 25 motes, right? When you put in, and then the opposing team gets to invade rather than you getting to invade. So it flipped it up a little bit, made it kind of interesting. I did not get a chance to go in there, but But Rob, you did, right? What
Yep.
were your thoughts on this week?
Yeah, so I kind of at the beginning of the week I didn't touch Gambit. And then I was reading some forum posts and people were saying that like, oh, this breathes new life into Gambit, and some guy was like, I have not touched Gambit in a long time and I ended up playing all night and it changed my life. And I'm like, all right, well, this is probably the internet being the internet, but let's
statement. Okay.
what?
Strong statement. Okay. Keep
Yeah,
going, keep
exactly. So
going.
I'm like, there's no way that just changing the invaders completely flips the dynamic of Gambit. And yeah, lo and behold, the internet lied. It's interesting. It's definitely fun to play a different way. I don't know if I would go as far as saying it breathes new life into Gambit. I think there's some deeper problems. But this is kind of like last season when we were having the conversations about like the Trials labs and them kind of mixing things up a little bit. I think this is neat. I think it's a step in the right direction. Not necessarily like saying that flipping invaders is what you need to do in order to fix Gambit. But I'm saying like changing up some of the fundamental core like ways that Gambit is played. I think mixing those things up and seeing how like seeing the results, seeing like the win-loss ratio, and seeing kind of how that all comes into play, I think is really important. And I think that's a step in the right direction in terms of like collecting data and seeing what happens. I'm not totally convinced that this was the right week to do it, because, as you know, they always do these labs for like a week and then they just turn it off and go back. But this is also the week that GMs came out, and this is not kind of the normal GM cadence where you do your one Scarlet Keep run for the Triumph, and when you're working on the title, but you can do all 6 of them, and we'll go into GMs a little bit more later. So I feel like people have been a lot more preoccupied with doing GMs this week, and I feel like you're not actually going to get the data that you want, or at least I'm suggesting that it's probably going to be skewed, and that people that maybe would try out this new Gambit mode beyond the 3 pinnacles that they're trying to get, which at this point, I think most people, if they're going for pinnacles so that they can get to the max cap of 1560, I think most people have gotten it by now. And so even the engagement with just fundamentally playing your 3 matches of Trials per week is probably pretty diminished. And now with GMs being out and being able to play whichever ones you want and really trying to grind those out, I don't think you're going to get the engagement that they were maybe hoping for, or at least the data that they were hoping for, or I would suspect that part of it's skewed. So I think overall it's neat that they did that. I'm hoping and looking forward to some of the other changes that they bring, but I don't think this was the right time to bring it out.
You don't think so?
I think it shouldn't have been the same week as GMs being released. They should have done this like last week.
Okay, that makes sense. But at the end of the day, do you think it was a good decision to have it as a lab?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think this is the only way they're going to get data in terms of like how are we going to try to bring people back? How are we going to try to renew interest in the game mode? Like you got to do something. I still think you got to add more maps. That's always going to be my fundamental. Same with PvP, but this feels a step in the right direction of like, okay, we're not necessarily tied to the base kind of flow of the game where it's like you get 25 motes, you then invade to try to slow down the team. Like in theory, that sounds like the right thing to do, but obviously that when it's implemented, there's all kinds of flaws with sort of that design, as been heavily discussed by everybody, like why Gambit is not necessarily the best game mode. So I think changing one of the core ideologies or ways of how the game is played, and actually giving, like, because you can kind of say if you're first to dunk 25, you're ahead. And so letting the other team sort of have a chance to try to slow down your progress, again, in theory, whether or not that's been implemented correctly, I don't think so, and we can talk about that. I think it's cool that they're trying to change some of those things that have basically been tied to Gambit since day one, right? We've always had first to dunk a certain amount gets to invade to try to slow down the other team, and this completely reverses that approach. So I think it's good. It's just, I don't know if it's necessarily it's not going to be the one thing to fix Gambit and make it like, breathe new life into it.
True. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And am I right in assuming that you think the thing that would breathe new life into Gambit, or simply get more people to play it, is by just simply adding new maps? Because that's where I'm at.
I mean, I know I keep saying that where it's like, oh, just add more maps. I don't think that would solve Gambit either. Like, even if they brought the 2 maps that they've taken out, I think you'd have some people who are like, okay, cool, there's more maps in Gambit, but Gambit still sucks, so I'm not touching Gambit. Like, you're going to have those people. I would probably, like, kind of knowing myself, I'll sometimes have a night where I'm like, yeah, I'll just keep playing Gambit for a while. And then I get to a point where I'm like, I've done the Emerald Coast 3 or 4 times now. Like, I'm kind of over it. And like, that's my trigger to turn it off. Now, I know I don't speak for the entire community, so there's probably other people that turn it off way sooner than that, or playing Emerald Coast 5 times in a row doesn't bother them. But that's kind of my trigger, where it's like the sameness. The same with, like, I jump out of the strike playlist when I start playing the same strikes over and over again, when it's like we have so many of them. Like, that's my kind of idea, where I think I would probably stay in the playlist longer if there was more diversity of maps. But I don't think that the community as a whole will start coming back to Gambit for that reason alone. And I think that's like, so I think there's 2 parts to it. I think you have to increase the number of maps, but then you also have to change some kind of core mechanics. And some of the stuff that they introduced this season helps with that. And I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think there's obviously a piece of the puzzle missing, and I don't even know if Bungie knows what that is. And so that's why they're trying out this trials lab. Is they're like, what are some of the things that we've held with from the very beginning that maybe don't work so good? And this is one of those things that they're trying. So I commend them for saying, like, what can we change to see if that's going to be the trigger to make Gambit better. And again, they're collecting data on the back end that we don't know. What statistics are they looking at, and trying to measure things. I'll go back to I think fundamentally you're going to get skewed data, because this is not the right week that it should have come out when you release GMs at the same time.
Yeah, that's fair. They've had skewed data situations in the past. One thing I hope they do is I hope this open discourse between us and them in terms of what we want to see from Gambit, what they want to make Gambit, stays consistent. So I hope there's an open discourse continuing to exist. And I hope they're relatively transparent with the data that they're collecting and the data they want to find and stuff. It's always nice to see those numbers when they do share them in the TWAB and stuff. So I hope they share, they don't have to share everything they find, but hopefully they're relatively transparent with the, at least the most important statistics. But Robbie, did you get a chance to jump in there at all? Or do you have any thoughts on this situation?
Well, no, I did not jump in, and I feel like I've been doing this sometimes when they try things like this, and I agree with Rob that like doing it during first GM week was like a big mistake, because obviously also they had palindrome during this GM week, so it, like, for a lot of people, and we'll get into the farming of the palindromes again, but for a lot of people that's gonna be like priority number 1 for the week. Right, so just you put yourself at a disadvantage right there. But at the same time, like, I don't need pinnacles anymore, even on my mule character that just carries my stuff around. So
you call it your mule character?
Yeah, it's just if I call it a Sherpa, it feels like, oh, it's a good character that Sherpas people, but it doesn't really. It just carries my stuff, right?
Right.
So instead of Sherpa, I need to refer to the Titan as the mule character. But I did basically think about it, and I just went with I don't want to contribute to any statistics of people coming back into it. The changes, I heard about them, I saw them in videos, I wasn't interested. I don't think it changes it enough for me. I think they've tried different things though, like because like, yeah, you can say new maps, and honestly, like, I feel I said that like at the beginning of this expansion, but if they would have not changed anything in Gambit and just put like a couple new maps, people would have been more interested. Would it have solved anything? Probably not in the long term, but it would have brought people back more than the changes that they implemented just by having new maps. So that's a thing, yeah. And changing, like Rob said, some core fundamental things about the game mode would also, increase interest. And the other thing that I would see is like, well, give some rewards, but they already had, right? Like the season where they had the bottom dollar and everybody was going crazy about it. Yeah, people played it, they didn't enjoy it, and they voiced it like, very strongly. Also, the perk pool being so huge on both Gambit and Crucible playlist weapons it's a thing that puts off a lot of people because it's like, yeah, you're gonna get one, but it might be trash most of the time, right? It's really hard to get like a really really good roll or a roll that you're going after, and I feel like that kind of works for Crucible because Crucible has more people playing it more. So, you stay in the playlist longer, you eventually might get something that, satisfies whatever you were looking for in that playlist specific weapon. But in Gambit, the matches are longer. The rewards don't seem consistent because sometimes even with running like Gambit Prosperity on my Ghost, like you win a game and you get no rewards, or you get something that isn't like Gambit specific. And yeah, now they have the focusing and whatever, but it, like, at least while I was doing my pinnacles, I did focus a bunch of servant leaders, and it was like super expensive. I know they changed that afterwards, but still, like the problem with that is that it's treating it kind of like trials and other things in the way that like you get one engram to focus every rank up. And at the beginning, it's easy because you rank up like 5 ranks like quite quickly. But
Right.
as you get higher and higher, it takes longer and longer to get another engram. So it doesn't feel like how, and it's happening the same with Banshee, for example, right now, where like before you would get an engram from Banshee every so often, but now because it's rank ups, yeah, same thing. First ranks go by really quickly, and then at the end you're like destroying weapons for like a week and a half until you get another engram. So it kind of feels terrible. I hope they look into that to make it a bit more consistent because I don't feel like it works the same. You should get these rewards more often because who cares? Is Banshee giving you some random weapon? It's not like an adept or something super specific or like a trials weapon that people are kind of looking for. It's just like a random thing. So I feel like it should be easier to get, and same for the Gambit focusing thing. You make it easier to get these engrams. It doesn't have to be that way.
Okay.
So I just didn't go into it. I don't want to contribute to those stats because in the end, that's the whole point. Like, I'm not interested. And I looked into what they did, and I'm still not interested. And so even if it is, like 5% better than it was last week, or actually probably like 400% better than it was like 2 weeks ago before they fixed Ariana's bow and all the other crazy weapons, it's still nothing for me there. So yeah, I just like, just on principle, skipped it.
That's fair enough. I mean, especially on a week like this, you only have a select amount of time for Destiny, and you want to spend it the way you want to do it because it's a video game and you want to be here and you want to spend it in a way that you're gonna have fun. So I'm proud of you. I feel like a lot of Destiny players force themselves to play stuff that they don't enjoy for no reason, and I don't quite understand that, but yeah, if it's not fun, don't play it. So
yeah. And I feel like it happened to me this past couple of weeks with like trials, right? Because I'm not the best PvP player at all. I'm like pretty average, if anything. So like sometimes you do get frustrated because obviously everybody wants the reward. But I feel like even on trials, I do have fun, even if we're getting our ass kicked here and there. So it's a different experience for me. And yeah, you're right. Like the game is so vast that there's no point in just doing things that you clearly do not enjoy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think from a like general gameplay loop perspective, like when you're in the match and you're playing Gambit, I don't know, at least for me personally, what would make it fun. Like I don't know what would compel me to play it. Besides, like Robbie, like you said, like if there was better loot drops and stuff like that, if there was better engram focusing, if that was better, maybe I'd jump in, but I'd want to have fun. I don't know what would make Gambit fun. Do you guys have any ideas? Like what what change personally do you want to see, if you have any ideas? And you don't have to. Like, obviously,
Well,
we're not the game devs, but
yeah, no, for sure. Because I feel this is like different than a lot of things I've seen before. But and this maybe I'm biased because it was like the first like real MMO that I got into, but it was the first MMO where I experienced what PvPvE was. Because before other games that I would play had like PvE and PvP, but no PvPvE. And this game, it was called Aeon. It was like a Korean game, like back in the day. Now they jumped into Aeon Classic, I think they're doing, but it's not the same company. But if anybody wants to try it out, the options there. But it was like huge game. I really loved it, and it had like this PvPvE mode, which was like a ship, right? So you start, and there's like basically 2 lanes and rooms that you kind of have to go through. So like a little boss, and then a bigger boss, and then a big, like whatever, things like that. So you wanted to go to the last boss, which was like a shared room. So whoever killed that last guy wins. But in between, there would be like connecting passages. So like at certain points, if you were faster than the other team, you would be able to go to their side, like send one of your guys to their side to try to mess with them, to try to slow them down from killing their boss, so that your team, like with like less people, would try to make it faster. And it was really fun because at the end, like if both teams were really good, like it would be like a giant battle at the end of like trying to fight like the other team while the boss is trying to like just destroy all of you at the same time. And I feel like it was very, I don't know, there was like satisfaction to be had just by, also because the way they did it was that you could only access it like I think certain days of the week, kind of like trials, but the rewards were only like you couldn't farm this. You had like a few chances a week, and that was it. It's not like you can go in there into that like special ship, and because the boss would drop like really cool stuff, and he would be kind of like on a rotation, so it wasn't the same guy, and get different things that people really want, like end game stuff. I remember there was like this hat that I wanted for I think I was a cleric, and it would only drop from him. So I had to wait for the right time where he's in the ship and like beat the other guys. And so just for the fact that it was like not forcing you to like, oh, I need to farm this like all week until I get it. No, it was just like, oh, you get a chance. Oh, it missed out. Okay, fine. Move on with your life. Do whatever else you wanted to do this week. And then come back next week, right? And I feel like that was like way better in that kind of mode, at least for me at the time. I don't know if that would make it better here, but I do believe some sort of that thing, because I was thinking about it later, and I mentioned before that like I wish Gambit would come back once a month. And I feel like maybe that opinion came from my experience there, even if I didn't connect it before, in my head. So just the fact that like maybe like on trials they did guaranteed memento for the first flawless of the week after fixing it not dropping at all. So if you would have like a super hard, like let's call it that, like a really hard, difficult version of Gambit, but you could only play, let's say 3 times a week per character, like kind of like Pinnacles are.
Yeah.
And you needed to win, and a win on one of them would guarantee you your drop, and that's it. Maybe you get it on your first and you're done, right? Or maybe you still have to do all 9. But I feel like that would make people go into it, kind of enjoy it, go into it with like a different mindset of like, I want to do this. I want to get the, the carrot on the stick. And then that's it. You forget about it. There's no more Gambit. That's it. I don't know if that would solve it, but that would be like how it would solve it for me personally.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Just
Awesome.
Just to put it out there. Yeah.
Awesome. So slightly higher difficulty, and for lack of a better term, like a sense of exclusivity or like time gatiness, like that Trials has.
Yeah.
Cool. Rob, what about you? Have you had a chance to consider this? What would make Gambit like fun to play?
I mean, I kind of like Robbie's ideas of having it be somewhat of a more exclusive game mode. I think getting, if you do that, then you have to get rid of like the I would say a lot of the stuff that we've kind of come like the title would be obviously like reworked, and I think I'm trying to think of how to say this. Like we wouldn't have the Gambit skin for the shot, like the seasonal weapon and all that. Like I think you'd have to get rid of all of that. I think
It's tough. I mean, it's a tough
you know,
question.
it's because
It's
it's
a
like
loaded
I really want to like Gambit. I've always kind of had a soft spot like when it was like released like the week or two before Forsaken for everybody for like like half a weekend. I was like, wow, this is because that was also like we were coming out of like the dark side of D2's launch, and you know we had nothing but like Forsaken to look forward to with all of the changes that were coming and like all this anticipation and all the new middle tree subclasses they were adding, and then it's like, oh, and we're getting this PvEVP activity that we've never ever had before in Destiny, and it was so cool and such a neat concept. And it was like, well, obviously it's only going to get better. Like if they introduce this, and it was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't without its flaws from day one, and that was pretty obvious. But it was like, oh, it's going to get better. And like when Gambit Prime came out, I was excited for that because it's like, oh, they were saying like we've looked at all the kind of different ways people play, and we've turned it into 4 different kind of classes or character builds that you would do. There's like, you know, the Reaper and the Invader and kind of those roles. And really like Gambit felt like it was getting into its groove, and like, yeah, again, it had its flaws, but it was still neat to see iterations and designs on that. And I think that's my problem is Gambit's been really stale. Like fundamentally for a very long time. Like when they took Gambit Prime and kind of merged it in with vanilla Gambit, we'll call, it just kind of felt like vanilla Gambit with some changes to it, but they haven't really iterated on that in some like substantial or fantastical way. Even if it's not good, just having it feel different than kind of the fundamental way that it plays now. And like when the kind of the roles, if you will, came out where you had like the Reaper and I remember Reaper because that's what I played the most, but there was like Defender, and like the Dunker and then the Invader and things like that. And like having like trying to actually have class builds and like set armor bonuses. Like I used to play Diablo quite a bit, and the idea of having like an armor set that gave you some bonus for having a completed set, that was such a cool thing that they introduced in Season of the Drifter. That was like, it made me feel like it was a direction that we were heading with the game, and that they were using Gambit as like the jumping off point for that. Like that felt so neat to me as something that they were going to implement and iterate on, and then they kind of abandoned it after Gambit Prime. And I don't know why, because it seemed to have like people liked it. I really enjoyed playing around with like the Reaper set and trying to like optimize like strategies, and like as I really liked playing that role. I think a lot of people did because it was like easy to sort of identify what that role was. I also like the green kind of shaders to everything. Like I think that's why I was kind of excited about Gambit Labs, is like, oh, they're trying to like change things up. This doesn't feel like a substantial change in the same way that like Gambit Prime was like, we're going to completely make you think of and reevaluate the way you play Gambit. Like this isn't really that. Like Robbie, you were kind of mentioning before the show started that like stacked teams can do this thing where they put 24 motes in, and then everyone goes and collects 15 motes. And as soon as like the Invader comes, or as soon as like the other team dunks a bunch, then you just go and dunk your 60 motes, and now before you know it, you're at 84. And so it's like there's still fundamental problems with like how Gambit is played and how it can be exploited despite all of these like changes and ideas. And that's where it's like you need to go back to the drawing board and I think like start reevaluating like, hey, maybe Gambit Prime wasn't so bad, and maybe there was parts of it that could be sort of iterated on and do something, you know, have some new version of that. So that's where I would really like to see, like, if Gambit is going to be here to stay. So the TLDR is, I either like Robbie's idea where you have it almost be like Iron Banner, or trials where it's like once a week, or once a month or something like that for the whole week. Let people kind of get it out of their system, have some fun with it. Okay, it's Gambit. It's going to have some problems. Have some pinnacle rewards be really, really kind of chased after. Have some cool like weapons and stuff. But then, so either do that, or if they're going to heavily invest into Gambit to try to make it one of the quote unquote core playlists, then you just got to like start shaking things up again and really dive into like, what do you want Gambit to be? Do you want it to be played as much as like as Crucible and Strikes? And if so, I don't think just tweaking one variable once in a while is enough. Like, you really got to change things up for it, just because it's so stale right now that it's not gonna. This isn't sustaining.
Yeah,
and add new maps. So that's
please, desperately. You've inspired me, though. I'm going to be a brave person, and I know people want to burn me at the stake for this, but I've always liked Gambit Prime. I liked when it released, and I love the idea of everyone having distinct roles. I was not a fan of the reckoning part of it, where you have to grind out a ridiculous number of armor pieces and stuff like that. But all right, so here's my idea, and not everyone will agree, but my dream idea for Gambit would be, I would combine both of your ideas. I would say, number one, I think it should be every weekend. It'll be like a weekend thing, like Trials. Number two, I think it should be Gambit Prime, but instead of having everyone have to like grind out for armor sets and stuff like that with Reckoning, or maybe you could do it, but don't have the Reckoning system, because I think that was nightmarish. I think because this is what I anticipated it being when they first announced it, was it would function kind of like Overwatch. I think how like Overwatch works right now is you like pick like offense, tank, or like support class, and then you select a character from that role. I thought everyone picked a role and like at the beginning of the match, and then like, oh, you're set for that, match or that role for the rest of the match. I would like to see something like that, where you get to select a role and run with that. However that works, I don't know how the selecting system would work, but I would want everyone to like be able to have all the perks and stuff like that, regardless of how many armor pieces they have, and they get to select a role and they have that for the rest of the match. I think that would be a lot of fun. I really liked the idea of the Reaper, Invader, Collector, Sentry, stuff like that. I thought they were all interesting, and I think that would shake up the game for sure. Even normal Gambit could exist alongside it, maybe, I don't know, but I would love to see those roles come back, and I would love to see it be like a weekend event sort of thing. Would be really cool.
So I apologize, Robbie. Do you have any idea what we're talking about, Robbie, with Gambit Prime?
Yeah, I do. I've watched videos of it.
Okay,
but one thing I want to add, and that you both mentioned now, was like the roles and all that stuff sounds cool. And I feel like in a way, when you play with stack teams, for example, the few times that we actually try to help like a friend with their seal or whatever they were doing. So like, let's say if I was just invading, right? I'm not collecting motes. Maybe I'm collecting 5 at the first time. And then I'm sticking in like near the center, shooting things from afar, killing their taken, and then invading as soon as I can, and always grabbing heavy. So that was kind of like a role, because like after the first few 5 motes, I was not grabbing motes anymore. I was trying to help make motes and trying to stay on top of the of their taken and on top of invading and all that stuff. So I felt like that was kind of like if people were playing things, you would have like one guy collecting, a couple guys killing stuff, you would have the one guy who's always looking for the invader, who usually doesn't have any motes. Like there were certain roles that you could have, like if you were trying to play the game efficiently. But like a lot of times what happened to us and what happened to me, and I think what still happens, and that shouldn't happen, because they know that this is not right. And they know, because they said it this week for Iron Banner, we're going to get rid of the ability bounty, because that's the one that takes the longest for people. And there's not much time. There's only 2 weeks left. So we're going to get rid of it, right? So they know. But still, they force you on Gambit to go and do stupid things. Like they force you to not play efficiently. They force you to use subclasses that you don't want to use. They force you to use weapons that you don't want to use. They force you to grab 5 motes so that you can do your bounty of like 5, 10, and 15. When ideally you don't want to maybe grab 5 motes, right? Or whatever the game calls for. So they literally force you with these bounties to not play efficiently. So that would be like another big change that I would do. Get rid of all those crazy bounties. Just make it like kills, or
Yep.
or like something easier, something achievable, something like if you're gonna do like ability kills, make it all ability kills regardless of subclasses. That's already an improvement. Things like that. Just stop trying to make people do things that is basically impacting dirt, especially if you're playing with randoms, right? Because I'm going in there and just doing my bounties because I want my pinnacle and my bounties to get my bright dust at the end of the 8 weekly bounties. That's all I care for. And I'm hurting my team, right?
Yep.
I'm not being like an asset for my team. I'm just being completely selfish about my own bounties. I don't care if I win or lose. So I feel like that is also like one big change that I would make that would help the game a lot. Just people playing the game in a way that was efficient for winning, not efficient for doing them stupid bounties.
Yeah. I agree. You could take all of those and just get precision kills, get kills with primary weapons, get kills with specials, get kills with abilities, use your super a bunch of times. Like a lot of the ones they do for like PvP are pretty like generic, where it's like you inevitably kind of like passively complete them, like defeat warlocks. Like you eventually will come across enough warlocks in PvP that you'll get that bounty completed, but you don't have to go out of your way to get it done. And I fundamentally agree with you. It's really like you can tell when there's those people that are doing their 3 matches for their 8 bounties and then they're just going to get the hell out of there. And it's like they're playing super dumb, very selfishly. And it's like, and that like there's like YouTubers that make videos of like, I think it's like Fallout Plays. He's like, I played 50 games of Gambit, so you don't have to, or something. And like he shows people that are just sitting there with like 13 motes, and like Drifter's like, dunk and you'll summon the primeval, and they're still going to get 2 more, probably because they're trying to complete a bounty. And it's like you could have summoned your primeval. It's like it's infuriating to watch those, because it's like why do some people play that way? But it's like because they hate the game mode and they just want to get their pinnacle and get out of there. And it's
at
like
that point, it's like either you do it this game and do your 15 and get done with the bounty. That is more important to him than winning,
right?
Because if he wins and doesn't do the 15, he has to play yet another game,
right?
So why?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like it's so. Again, we're not devs, but it's like it's so blatantly obvious. Like these anecdotal stories are what plague, and I would say genuinely like kind of ruin the experience of Gambit, and it makes it difficult to want to go back week in and week out, or even play more than like 5 or 6 matches at a time, because it's just like and so you're either encouraged to play like with a stacked team, or you just get your 3 your pinnacles and then get out. It's like there's no like I don't feel like you can just jump in, because I'm still one of those guys fundamentally where it's like sometimes I can't think of anything better to do, so I'll just run strikes for a while, because I'm like, yeah, I need to get some bounties done. Yeah, I need to like start working towards my skin for the shotgun. Like I'm just gonna run strikes for a while and like kind of shut my brain off, and I have a good time doing that. I do not have a good time doing that in Gambit, because it's like it's such a painful slog to do that, and that's why it's like I don't think it'll ever be a core playlist the way it's designed.
Yeah, that's true. Well, unless like a fundamental shift,
right,
from the bottom up is made, I suppose. All right, so let's switch topics now that we've made like a whole patch note list of things we want to see change in Gambit. Let's transition to Grandmaster Night Falls. So, what did we get this week? We got Birthplace of the Vile. Was that this week as well?
Scarlet Keep is the kind of set one. But with this season, they made it so that if you have the Conqueror title, or that you've earned it in the past,
you can play all of them.
You've got all of them
yes.
to you at least once. Whoever's the fire team lead, if you haven't completed the other 5 yet, then you can do them this week. But you can play Scarlet Keep any number of times that you want. You can still get however many rewards. And the rewards for this week are set across the entire GMs. So it just so happens that Palindrome and Plug 1, which, fusions are pretty hot right now as well, are the rewards. So a lot of people are playing GMs. And in fact, you'll see a lot of people who want to run the arms dealer which is I believe going to be the strike next week as like the set one, and then you can still do the other ones that you haven't completed. But people are trying to find other people who haven't completed Arms Dealer this week so that they can get a essentially free run, because Arms Dealer is probably one of the easier GMs, mainly because it's been around for so long and people can just kind of run it like the back of their hand, but you can also like melt the boss instantly, so you don't have to do like the final sequence. So that's kind of the trick, is people are like, oh, I'll make you fire team lead if you haven't done Arms Dealer, and we'll do Arms Dealer, because people are trying to farm for pallies and plug ones. But yeah, so all of them are available if you've gotten a Conqueror title in the past.
Gotcha. And so Birthplace and the Violin Lightblade are the two new Witch Queen GMs.
Correct.
Gotcha. So have either of you guys played either of the new ones, Birthplace or Lightblade? I've heard Lightblade is very difficult because of the arc burn.
Yes, and the BSery that is the Lucent, they will hawk suppressor grenades that are pretty devastating, and there are reports of a single shield throw knocking out an entire team in like one throw, because it'll bounce off of every surface, and it's pretty devastating. So I played Lightblade once, and I was just like an LFG group, because I was like, yeah, I anticipate it being hard, and I kind of assumed that it was going to be hard. I even remember playing the first time I ran through it. I'm like, this is going to suck as a GM. Like, I could just kind of feel certain sequences. I'm like, this is going to be terrible. So I was like, you just got to start playing it, start kind of practicing the rooms and kind of running through it. And like, we didn't even get past the first room. Like, one guy kept like, because the Lightblade, he will shoot these arc projectiles from across the arena, and it's like, and they just hit you like midair constantly, and it's frustrating, and it's so I like, one guy just rage quit after like 2 or 3 deaths, and I was like, okay, this is not going to happen right now. Like, this is not one of those that you can probably easily pick up with an LFG group. Like, you need to have mics, you need to have comms, you need to be able to coordinate and make sure you're playing smart. But from what I understand, it's not the hardest one. There was one like the Garden World that I guess is considered to be the hardest GM at like ever.
Really?
Like across the entire. That's what I believe it's Garden World, the one with the Hydra boss at the end.
Yeah,
the one that revolves around, because there's literally no cover for that entire GM. So for the final boss, at least with this, there's cover. You can kind of run around the perimeter. The videos that I've seen of people completing it, it doesn't look like the worst thing in the world. It just looks like it requires a lot of coordination. And then Birthplace, I haven't touched, but I heard it's not that bad. It just the boss room can get a little hairy, but as long as you're keeping on ad control, it's pretty manageable from what I understand.
Yeah, I've only even played that strike like once normally, but I remember it not being. I would not anticipate that being very insane. So that's good to hear. Robbie, did you get a chance to play Lightblade or anything?
No, unfortunately, this week was kind of busy for me, like IRL.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, and then so the time I had to play, I spent with like friends doing things that my friends would do. So a lot of those times were not like GMs, which was fun actually. Like it was, because I still feel like it's this like decompression time of like all the grind from the new expansion. So I'm just like, having fun with the game right now, instead of trying to stress myself out again, trying to chase like the Conqueror seal in the first week, which I still think that is like a good idea. Like I'm glad that they did it, because it was kind of sad that you would guild it and it would be there gilded for 2 weeks and then it would disappear. So I feel like this is a good change. I just feel that having palindrome on the first week is never a good idea. Like, stop doing that, please. And for everybody that asked me, which was like a lot of people to play GMs with them, was always only for the arms dealer, which was maybe also one of the other contributing factors of why I was like, yeah, maybe I'll stay away from GMs for this week. Because personally, I do have like 2 good palindromes that I already love. One for PvE, one for PvP. I almost never touch mine for PvE, just because I feel like I have better options for PvE hand cannons and better options for void hand cannons. for void weapons in general. Sorry.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's got like the Vanguard trait on it doesn't really appeal to me as much. Like obviously, if it was like a trials weapon, I feel like, oh well, maybe I go for it because I do want like the PvP trait on it. But I don't. So and yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just like feeling like, oh, too many people asking just about arms dealer. Like yeah, and I don't want to farm arms dealer. I feel like we've done that, and it's always got to be arms dealer and the palindrome. Maybe that's why I'm just having like PTSD about it. But I did watch a friend that I keep asking to be on the podcast, by the way, but he's too shy. But he does like the whole solo flawless GMs and all that stuff.
Oh, cool.
So I did watch it, and Lightblade took him like a couple days compared to the other ones, and like he was getting consistently to the boss room in like 25 minutes. Like the way there wasn't like too problematic, but the boss room is so glitchy. Like after watching, he even put out a whole video of like deaths, not only that, the whole nice run where he cleared it, but like the crazy deaths. So the knights spawn in kind of different places. It's not like set like other GMs where you know where they're gonna be, so you can position yourself accordingly and try to be prepared. This one's kind of spawn according to where you are. But then the problem that was happening was that like the boss was supposed to go back to the middle, but he wouldn't. He would spawn like since the knight was gonna spawn there, he would either spawn on top of a knight or on top of you, or like he would just teleport randomly. And the fact that he shoots that like that he's got this arc thing that he does with his hand, right? And the funny thing is that it is kind of telegraphed in the way that you can know that he's gonna do it because he raises his arm, but I don't feel that it's on the way they did it, that he can literally be looking 180 degrees the other way,
Yep.
and then still shoot backwards or shoot sideways or shoot wherever you are. So I don't think that's right. I think they should be able to shoot like in front of them, and you should be able to kind of like rotate and find cover or things. But like the fact that he can just shoot like literally through his body just so that he can hit you on if you're standing on his back left, and he's shooting with his right hand, he can literally shoot through his body backwards and hit you. They should fix that. I don't think that's fair. Like it's not gonna make it any easier or harder. It's just not gonna be so frustrating. And again, it wasn't me playing it, but like just me being like a friend and watching and just trying to support my friend trying to get through it. It was fun to be involved, and also because like I was able to watch while I wasn't home. So, since I was waiting and doing some other things that allowed me to be like, there watching. So that was like my way of interacting with GMs this week.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, they always wanted it to be watchable. I remember when they first announced GMs, they're like, "Oh, this is going to be like an esport." And I'm like, "All right,
No,
sure."
Yeah, no.
There's no shortage, and I'm going to put on my I hate GMs hat right now, just as a forewarning. Like, this is...
Where do I get a hat like that?
I don't know. I made it myself, and it's just full of rage and seething disdain for GMs, where, like, I don't know. Some of them, there's always, like, 2 or 3 that aren't bad, and then there's always, like, 1 or 2 that are just like, how did this get through playtesting? Like, this is not interesting. What's interesting though is when you crush a ghost, you get 3 revive tokens, which is insane. Instead of just like the normal 1 that you get for defeating champions, which is kind of funny. But yeah, some of the stuff that I've seen with the Lightblade strike in particular, like it looks a little buggy and frustrating. But that's also nothing new. And you brought up an interesting point, Rob, because so this week I've done the Scarlet Keep. And we can talk about cheese because that's another fascinating thing. And I did the arms dealer, and then I also did Glassway because I was like, well, let's get one of the rough ones out of the way this week. And a bunch of people wanted to do Glassway, which I thought was crazy, but I'm like, okay, let's try it out. And I still think that's one of the harder GMs, but that one is starting to turn into one of my favorites, and I'd never thought I'd say that, because that boss room feels, I would say, relatively not predictable, but because you can still have the rogue ones come up from like the side of the room. But that one is probably one of the more satisfying when you have it down, when you understand the mechanics, and when you feel like you can completely control the entire arena. That's when I think that's strike. And that's the same for what's the one?
Just before you go on the next one,
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you that it's a satisfaction to get through it and know that you can like not die to wyverns every time and stuff.
Right.
Get the timing down and all that. But what I don't like about it is that, first of all, it takes too long to get there, and the way there is kind of easy.
Yep.
But the second thing I don't like about it is like you have all this open space, right? Like all this crazy arena they built. And the best way to do it is to literally hide in one little tiny dark room.
Yep.
So you don't even get to see anything. You're just like in this little tiny room looking at doorways, which is why I kind of don't like it that much.
No, and I agree with you. And what I was going to kind of contrast with that is where I think it does well, because it is an open arena, is the Proving Grounds GM, because that is a completely open arena. There's very limited cover, and there is one part that you end up kind of hovering back and forth in that little tunnel in the back. But that one feels like another one where if you can control the arena, it's a really satisfying GM to complete. That one also, I would say, does a pretty good job of being pretty difficult all the way through, or at least kind of like balanced difficulty all the way through. Whereas, like, I agree, the GM or the Glassway is like not bad, a little rough in the where you're draining the pool here and there. I still, the fundamental thing that I hate, and it didn't seem to be as problematic, although there was, when I was doing the Scarlet Keep more than anything, there is still some BS one-shot stuff. And that's what kind of worries me about the Lightblade, is there's a ton of one-shot things in there that I'm just like, you got to get rid of it. And we talked about this when we were playing, when the Witch Queen campaign came out, where it's like, that was difficult content that didn't have shenanigan one-shot stuff constantly, and it didn't rely on match game, and it felt really good and satisfying when you completed some of those tasks. It's funny playing the GMs now after playing the campaign on difficulty, and I've done it twice. I've gone through it on Legendary. GMs feel very dated in terms of like how they're designed, when compared to now playing the Legendary. And I know it feels weird saying dated when this content's technically only like a year and a half old, these GM Nightfalls, but they feel very archaic in the design of just like constant one-shot BS killing you, and like you're talking about with like the Lightblade shooting through himself to hit you. It's like, how does that even make sense? And it kind of takes you out of it when you're trying to engage with it. And so it's like just kind of more of that kind of stuff. And so I don't know. I've mixed feelings about the GMs as always.
I agree with you. In like basically everything you said. I feel like they do feel a bit dated. That's true.
Yeah.
But there's still issues. Like I expected the Lucent Hive and stuff to be like more fair, kind of in like the way the campaign felt,
right.
And they feel like super OP, which is insane.
Yep.
That's crazy to see, and I don't know if they acknowledge this. So I'm gonna ask you, because maybe you're more informed than I am. But I know that a lot of people have been posting videos and kind of gathering data about the crossbow thing, one shot.
Yeah,
it seems like it's not working right, as far as I can tell. It seems like the one shot thing from the crossbows is like probably has to be nerfed.
Yeah, the Scorn crossbow, Scotty, for if you're not quite sure, supposedly is like, they're bugged, and they're like doing, and it's like in all content. Like it feels like that in Gambit. It feels like that just sort of in normal like exploration. It seems kind of crazy, like and buggy. But yeah, I haven't seen any kind of acknowledgement, or like I don't think there's anything in the patch notes where it's like, hey, we're gonna make these the biggest D-bags of all time. Get ready to get one shot by them constantly. And that's what's kind of worried me about Birthplace of the Vile. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this GM right now. It's like if they're just gonna one shot constantly, because that is my what bugs me more than like match game and all the other champion stuff is like being one shot by stuff from like across the arena, and that was happening to me during the Scarlet Keep. There were some acolytes because there in a couple places where they had like some sniper type thing, and I was getting one shot by stuff. I'm like, what? Why is this? And it's like so far across the arena where it's like I can't even hit them with anything that I've got equipped, but they can just take me out, no problem. That kind of stuff drives me nuts, and is like always going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to argue or complain about. I guess whine about. Let's be honest, I'm whining about it. And I did it. I will say, and I'll full disclosure admit, and I'll also kind of defend myself. Both Scarlet Keep runs that I've done, we cheesed the final boss at the end, which I hate.
Ooh.
But every LFG team that I found, like the first team that I did it with, I didn't even know they were going to cheese it, and then they just like ran. So like, for those of you that don't know, and who cares? This will come out after the Scarlet Keep GM week is over. Is when the gate comes up with the final boss with Hash Ladoon, you can run behind the gate, and there's some piles of bones, and you can jump on the bones and then jump on a door and then jump on top and be outside of the arena, and you can constantly shoot and hit things and kind of jump over the wall and slowly kind of pick away at stuff and take out the champions and be basically behind cover, and as long as you have like healing rifts, you're fine. And it just completely like negates the entire final fight. It ends up taking like 15 minutes because you're jump shotting over everything with bows, but it's pretty guaranteed that you're going to complete the GM. So like, I didn't know we were doing that until they ran behind the gate, and I'm like, what is happening? And then they jumped up there. I'm like, okay, so I guess we're cheesing it. And so it's like, and then the second time I found a group, and they said like right at the beginning, like, we're going to cheese it, by the way. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I guess that's fine. So like, that's the other thing too, is I feel like every GM, and we've also kind of talked about this, it's like the punchline or solution is to either try to cheese the final boss fight, or you've got like the Lake of Shadows where it's like just immediately nuke him. And that's why it bums me out, but the Warden of Nothing is my favorite strike in the game, but it's one of my least favorite GMs, mainly because it uses all three champions, and it has like I think elemental shields of every type. So I think it's a little too leaning into the match game. But that final fight, you're just encouraged to immediately nuke the boss because you don't actually want to do the mechanics of that fight, like trying to hide behind the flame cover constantly. And that bums me out because it's like, it's an interesting mechanic, but I don't think I've ever really played it, because even in normal strikes, people just immediately nuke the boss. And it's like, is that really the intended strategy? And so I hate to admit it, I'm finding myself more interested in the GMs that force you to actually play the final encounter, and learn the mechanics. That's why like the Glassway, as tedious as it is, and I think there are way too many champions in the final. This is, by the way, this is the first time I've ever maxed out on revive tokens. I didn't know there was a cap of 20, but we were sitting capped out on champion revives like halfway through the final boss fight because we were just so efficient at taking everything out. It's like, wait, why are we being punished with capping out our revive tokens when it's like you're throwing like just countless champions? I think that fight is a little overindulgent. I know I'm saying a lot of things right now. It's just like GMs are they're all over the place in terms of like emotional difficulty. And it's really frustrating having played the legendary campaign and coming back to GMs where I'm like, oh, that's right, this is still end game strike content, and it's not good.
Right. And like, actually, when you mentioned that you cheesed it, I thought that you were going to talk about the one at the beginning now, where you can just keep the whole beginning by jumping on the rocks on the right side. Like, literally just avoid everything. Just go through the top of the mountain.
Oh, really? That's a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing. So, because I know that they said that they fixed a lot of that, and yeah, I was expecting previous seasons the Scarlet Keep, even on Master, was just like cheesing it on the back of the room, as long as you had one guy up there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But now, yeah, like also the beginning, you can literally jump on the map on the right side mountain thing and just go over it and just land down at the place before the bridge. And just walk backwards a little bit, and boom, you spawn everything in the front without the champion, and it still gives you platinum.
Seriously?
Yeah, so that saves a lot of time, and I've seen that done mostly now as well. The one thing also about the shields and this and that, like especially with the arc burn, I was happy to see things that were not like used for a long time, like making its way back to the meta, at least in PvE, like Nation of Beasts, on
Right.
Arc hand cannon, and the Tarantula, which a lot of people just dismiss a lot for being like worse than other linears. But just because it's Arc, and I think it's maybe the only one that is Arc, so that's the one you get if you
Right.
have one, which a lot of people might not. But funny enough, and I feel like this is happening, and just because I remember seeing people try Anarchy for a little bit and just quickly realizing that it's not the play anymore. It doesn't do what
Right.
it used to do. But now everybody, including myself during the whole season, I think we've been crutching on Arbalist.
Yes.
Because
fantastic.
but it's going in the same direction that the Anarchy was. It's like you just need Arbalist for everything because it's
Right.
anti-barrier, because it breaks every type of shield,
Yep.
because it allows everybody else and yourself to do more kinetic damage after you break the shield.
Right.
So like I like that Arbalist. It's so good right now. I hate that Arbalist is like the only best option that we got for
Right.
everything.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. It makes sense. It's like the key to like the puzzle, like the match game and the champions and everything is like, the puzzle game where you have to like have something that lines up with every, potential encounter. And Arbalist is like the master key. And it's
Yeah.
like the only master key that just solves all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If-
especially because then you have two linears, so you only need one ammo finder.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, we kind of talked about this last week, and I know there was kind of a surge. There was a couple content creators who were making some videos a couple weeks ago, and they were using the key analogy also to kind of talk about the
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah. So like it's yeah, you have the Bungie's like the strike is the lock, and then your loadout is the key. And I'm paraphrasing and probably butchering the analogy, but essentially it's like it's match game, and the champions make it so that you have to make a key that fits that. And so it ultimately, and so the argument is like, is it unhealthy for the game because it blocks out build potential? And kind of the fundamental idea, because there's been a huge surge recently, and we talked about this a while back, probably when I was complaining about match game, is there's been a lot of changes to exotics and a lot of the build crafting, especially with Void 3.0, where you're encouraged to use like going all in on Void, right? Having like a Void special weapon and a Void heavy weapon, so that way all of the exotics that you use and like the wells that build that you have and all of that stuff kind of revolves around getting kills constantly with Void damage, albeit from your weapon or abilities, and everything kind of synergizes together. That's all really well and good, but then the moment that you throw match game in there, now you can't use that funnel web or you can't use that palindrome. You have to use something else that's got unstoppable. In this case, maybe it is Nation of Beasts, which I agree. I'm glad that we all like you hold on to one of those because it's a good hand cannon, and now it's got some utility with Arcburn and Unstoppable. But like that's sort of what ends up happening. And so like your build crafting just goes out the window when you're heavily reliant on now having to diversify. And so that's kind of that lock key analogy that a lot of people are using, where it's like, what's the point of having this like high level build crafting if you can't even go into like the highest end game content with that build crafting to actually see if your build is at its full potential, because you're constantly having to deviate from that because you need to have something that takes out every shield type and has, different, like you can't use your funnel web build because you have to use something that's got unstoppable and not overload, because that's what this particular GM requires. And so it kind of contradicts itself pretty heavily and frustratingly, because they have this kind of key lock situation where you have to use. So yeah, all of that to say, the punchline is anytime there's anti-barrier, there's probably also going to be match game. So you're just going to be running Arbalist. And that sucks because they've created a problem and then they've created one solution, and then everyone uses that one solution, because if you're not using it, you're being foolish. And that's like, what are we doing? Like this, we've had this conversation so many times, but it just keeps coming up, and they haven't proposed anything to alter it. And again, that's why I stand by like the legendary campaign did it right, and they didn't rely on match game, and they didn't rely on champions, and it was phenomenal. So,
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah. We've been saying it since the beginning on this show, but like champions, man, the whole idea of like the whole thing you were just saying, like restricting you to a certain thing it just doesn't make any sense. It's not fun. And yeah, it ruins like the build crafting. You work so hard to build some cool thing, and you want to test it out against like a big challenge, and then you're like, oh no, sorry, you have to use this specific set of things. And it's like, well, what was the point of that? So yeah, fair point. Robert, do you have anything else to add?
Just I'm still surprised at the way to go a lot of times, and I think people will do the void for most characters, but like I still feel that the Warlock on Stasis is so the way to go, especially those new gloves that you can put two little turrets,
the osmiomancies.
And then like having your grenade come back when you put down your rift, when you take damage, when everything, so you keep putting down more little turrets. Like Stasis is still so strong on PvE, so don't sleep on that.
That's for every Nightfall every GM that I've done, it's osmiomancy. It doesn't matter what burn it is. I'm just using osmiomancy because well, and if you look at LFG posts, which is primarily what I use, because my current clan, shout outs to Rory, by the way, he wanted me to give him a shout out because he's started listening to it's a guy in my clan. So, and he's like, hey, can you give me a shout out in your next podcast? I'm like, yeah, okay. So hi, Rory. A bunch of the guys in my clan aren't GM ready. There's only a couple of guys in there that are at this point doing GM. So I've been doing a lot of LFG posts, and like every LFG post is like they need at least one lock that's using stasis. So yeah, like osmiomancy is just the way to do it. And that's totally fine, but it's like, again, it kind of contributes to that's why the glass way is so manageable, is like when I actually, because it took me 3 tries, and the first 2 was really stupid because the guy who was doing the actually post, we were doing it legit in the boss room where we were in the room, whether or not you consider that legit, because we're just funneling everything through that one little bottleneck. Feels like the Battle of Thermopylae. We were doing it legit, and then like halfway through, he decided he wanted to go to the cheese spot where there's that little like part of that pillar that you can jump onto where you're like heavily restricted. And I don't know why people think that's a good spot, because the overloads can immediately blast you with splash damage. Like I've never found that to be a viable, but yet again, like effing cheese, people want to just cheese these GMs, and it's like, we were halfway through the fight doing perfectly fine, and we would have done it well, but then he went and decided to go up there and got himself killed, and then so I had to like cast my super to get over there and try to res him, and then we just ended up wiping because he like ruined it. But it's like, we were doing well, we were doing it legit, and then for some reason you like had a panic attack and wanted to cheese it, and it's like, and then that cost us that, and so then like the other guy left and blah, blah, blah. All of that to say, so when I finally did do it, it was just 3 of us running stasis turrets with warlocks. So it's like, yeah, that's the play. Just freeze everything and you're fine. Which is maybe another conversation of like, yeah, maybe stasis is a little OP, but at least it's not.
They that they wanted stasis to be like crowd control, and I feel like it's in a good spot right there.
I agree, because it's not substantial. It doesn't do high DPS, right?
Yeah,
so
no. Yeah.
That is probably the good balance to it. And it's great that it's not every warlock is expected to just throw down middle tree sun.
It's still the same feeling though. Like before, everybody just wanted me to be the well lock,
right?
And now I'm just the stasis lock. It's
but I mean that's always been something that people have wanted, and that's something that D1 heavily suffered from, is that the subclasses didn't really feel like they had identities other than like Titan throws up a bubble and Warlocks can self-res. And that was kind of it. And at least this, it's like Warlock is sort of meant to be the support class. Either you're like the crazy healer or you're the throwing turrets to kind of slow down and do crowd control. So like, at least there is kind of that identity. It sucks that you're always kind of the support class, but it's like, that is kind of what feels like the role that Warlock is taking on.
Actually, I started playing Warlock when I got into the game because I've always played support classes. I've always played healers, and so like for me, it's not bad. Like I enjoy that. I'm not the guy with the most kills, but I'm the guy who tries to keep you alive.
Right.
And that's like, yeah, I enjoy that. It's good. One thing that I would like to add is like, and I see this in other games, right? And this is a thing that doesn't happen here, but I think we've talked about the same thing both in Nightfalls and in Gambits. And it's like, who's play testing this stuff, right?
Right.
Because I feel like maybe the way they play test it is like, oh, is it fun? Is it working out? Are things spawning where they're supposed to spawn? Like all these like normal things.
Right.
But like the way that other games do it, and even some games have like PTS, right? Like play test servers. So
Right.
like some people can go in there. Like maybe have something like that where you have like some of these people who do the solo thing, or like people who are running them like in high levels of like easiness, and have them actually play test it in the way of like, here's this thing, break it, you know?
Right.
Tell us how you broke it, and then we can figure that out. Because I feel like that's not what's happening. I feel like they're just testing it for like, is it kind of how we envisioned it being played, how we envisioned it, instead of is it working how we envisioned it being played, how you guys are trying to break it all the time, you know?
Right.
And I feel like a lot of this content would like really, really be better if that was like a thing. If you would have gather a few community members or some people, you know, to actually try and break everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Playtesting always has been kind of a mystery to me about what goes on behind the scenes. Some of the decisions that are made. I mean, you know, go back to Stasis launch. Like,
Right.
who is playtesting this game? Is
Right.
anyone playtesting this game?
Right.
All right. Well, thank you guys for hopping on and chatting with me as usual, and thank you out there, audience, for listening. And we'll see you guys all next week. Peace.
Bye.
Ciao.
You can put this voice recording away and go on with your life, because you and I both know you'd have me yapping in your ear for the rest of your days.
Want to further the discussion? Get in touch with us at any of our Twitter handles, all of which can be found at our podcast description.